All right, welcome back to another episode of the Noob Sports Show. I'm your host, Ryan Noople, here with you each and every episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. I got Nic Sulsky with me. Nic is the president at Monkey Knife Fight. Nic, thank you for joining me.
Ryan, it's a true pleasure, man. I've been a fan for a while, so it's nice to join you live.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you tuning in and listening when you can as well, and just giving us a little bit of your time today to talk a little bit about fantasy sports and about, I guess, your path through this. I love to talk to people like yourself who, clearly looking at your track record, have been in the industry for quite some time and have a lot of experience in the iGaming space. And I just want to pick your brain a little bit and hear a little bit about your story. So I do appreciate it for sure. So.
No problem, man. If anyone's listened or met me before, I'm happy to talk.
Awesome.
I enjoy spreading the words. So yeah, let's go.
First things first. I mean, we're sitting here in very different times right now. We have no sports going on. We are all shackled into our homes and not going out. How are you personally holding up through this COVID-19 pandemic?
I mean, it's literally the weirdest time that I've ever experienced, that probably most of us have ever experienced, right? I mean, I think that personally, though, outside of the ridiculousness in the real world, my personal life, my family's personal life hasn't really changed all that much, to be completely candid. I mean, Monkey Knife Fight is a remote business, so we've built over the last 3 years and change, completely remote, and my wife obviously has had to adapt to working from home. And my daughter, who's in grade 6, unfortunately, is missing out on the end of her elementary school year. So there's a little bit of, obviously there's a lot of disappointment there. But from a day-to-day perspective, our lives are pretty, are pretty normal. The biggest thing, and I know you can adapt, you can relate to this, is there's no sports to turn on every night. I mean, most people who find themselves working in the fantasy sports industry, most of them began because they just love sports, right? Early days, I've been in the industry for a long time, as you mentioned, I think probably close to like 15 years now. And you get into the space not thinking about making a ton of money. You get into the space thinking about, wouldn't it be great to work in sports? Because I love sports, right? And trying to navigate your pathway into it. So I think that the lack of sports is really, personally, obviously from a business perspective, it's had a significant impact. But from a personal perspective, missing live sports is kind of the biggest thing. I mean, I miss hanging out with my friends and going out for a drink and this and that. But I'm lucky. I like my wife and I like my daughter, and I like.
That's
wine.
Always a good thing. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. And there's no shortage of wine, so that's okay.
For sure. Well, definitely, I think this has made us all in the sports industry. Even though we all know we love sports, I know I love sports. I've been in sports forever as well, but I don't think I've ever appreciated it more than I do right now. And I'm like, man, I really do love sports. Like, because when it's not here, it's just like life is not complete. Like something is just missing, and you can only watch reruns in old games so much. Don't get me wrong. I love the old classic throwback games and some of that stuff, but you can only do so much of that before you crave that live, what's going to happen next type feeling.
Totally. Dude, I've watched Jose. I live in Toronto. I've watched Jose Batista's bat flip game against the Rangers probably 4 times. And the amount of times in the last 2 weeks, we've been shown the Kawhi Leonard 76ers game 7, like, yeah, amazing, but not quite as great as last one.
Yeah. So you made an interesting comment there that kind of opened my. You said something about navigating your way through the sports industry, as a career. And I think there's a lot of college kids and kids these days, wanting to get into the sports industry in some way or another. And I just want to hear a little bit about how you navigated through, and maybe just touch on some of your experiences that you had and leading up to where you're at currently. We'll talk a little bit more about Monkey Knife Fight here in a bit, but how did you navigate through that, piece by piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really my journey is a bit different from, I think, a majority of the people in the fantasy sports space. I mean, a lot of people in fantasy sports are writers or are content people, I was never really a content person. I was an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my entire life. I mean, I started off, funny enough, making kids television shows. And so I was producing, directing, and hosting my own kids' television shows up here in Canada. And there was a sports talk show called Off the Record, which was very, very popular up here. And as I've said on a number of podcasts, and you'll probably hear me say this a few times on this show, I'm an if you don't ask, you don't get kind of guy, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you don't get used to the word no, stop being an entrepreneur. Because the vast majority of your life is going to be, you're going to hear that word. You have to keep flogging, keep pushing your way through. And quite frankly, if you're too scared to get that no and to ask for things, well, just stop. Like, honestly, you're probably not going to succeed. And so while I was doing that kids TV show, and there was this big sports talk show, and I love sports. And this show would have like B and C level celebrities on to talk about sports with athletes. And I just literally, wrote an email to the producer of that show saying, hey, I'm on TV. I love sports. I can talk. What do you think? So they actually let me do the show once. And I remember it was the day after the Blue Jays, like 1993, they had some kind of reunion of some of the players on the 92 or 93 team, and Candy Maldonado was on the show, and he hadn't slept, and he was completely hammered. It was and this was my first my first live sports experience, and here's drunk Candy Maldonado. I'm like, wow, this is nowhere but down from here. Anyway, so I started talking. That show went well, and I started talking about sports on TV, and then. Or on that show, and the producer of that show happened to be a big fantasy sports fan, and this was back in I think 2005, 2006.
Wow!
And the producer and I just became friends, and I was a big season-long fantasy guy, and there wasn't a lot of fantasy content out there, like broadband online content, or even let alone broadcast content about fantasy sports. So we just got to talking, and the two of us were able to convince the powers that be at a broadcast network in Canada called TSN, which is kind of the equivalent of ESPN up in Canada, that, hey, why don't we create a fantasy sports show, do it in the same studio with the same crew, and just have a go. And so they agreed, and we did something called the Fantasy Hockey Report, which I believe was one of the first broadband fantasy shows out there. So I did that for a couple of years, and literally it was just, I wasn't getting paid. It was just, let's just go and have some fun. Let's test this out. And then when I was doing that show, it got me really thinking about how fantasy and media and broadcast kind of really melded together. And then I founded a startup years ago called InGamer, and what we did was we built the first fantasy sports game that you can play in real time while you were watching a game on TV. So you could change your players during the game. Yeah, it was super.
Yeah, back then, that's very cutting edge.
It was very cutting edge. It was a free-to-play game.
Yep.
And quite frankly, we licensed it to some of the big – it was a licensing model. We licensed it to some of the biggest broadcasters up in Canada. It was our partner was Hockey Night in Canada, which is actually the longest running live sports television show ever in the world. Worked lots of deals. The problem was the business model at that point. And, like you said, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to get used to failure. Well, ultimately, the product, as you said, the product was a really strong idea. It was a great product, but because it was a free-to-play game, and this was just around the time when, the FanDuels and the DraftKings were starting, or not even DraftKings, it was Draft Street at the time. And the idea of daily fantasy sports was really starting to pick up. The fact that we were out there doing a licensing model and not generating revenue direct from consumers, logically, the product made sense from a media perspective. But if you're familiar with media, as you are, in order for a media to justify spending money, which they would need to do to license our product, they need to justify that spend by selling it to sponsors. Well, in order for sponsors to spend money, you need eyeballs. Well, if you're a startup and you're trying to integrate or launch a new product, there are no eyeballs. So it's like a vicious chicken and the egg game. And unless you're a startup that has runway for 2 or 3 years of literally making zero money, so you can give your product to a media company from a licensing perspective, let them build up the market share without having to spend a lot of money, and then get a payday, then it could work. But if you're a startup, like, unless you have that runway, it's not going to work. So one thing led to another. That startup I ended up getting recruited into a regulated gaming company based out of the UK, and they were looking at trying to get into the North American DFS space because they had seen what was going on with FanDuel and DraftKings. And so I joined that company, and we architected a deal alongside a New York marketing company to acquire Draft Day. Draft Day at the time was number 3, number 4.
Oh, I played a lot of Draft Day in the day.
Yeah, Draft Day was great, man. And so we acquired Draft Day, and the idea with Draft Day was because it was co-owned by a regulated gaming entity, and this was 2014, 2015, and FanDuel and DraftKings had really started exploding. But the regulated, like the casino operators and the regulated gaming operators couldn't touch DFS at that point because they didn't want to jeopardize their gaming licenses. But they all wanted to kind of tap into that sports span.
Sure.
And so the idea was, all right, let's buy a platform, let's turn it into a B2B white label, and then go to casinos and other regulated gaming operators and offer them kind of a shared liquidity marketing white label. So they weren't operating, so they weren't jeopardizing their gaming licenses, but they could still generate user base. You know the story. We acquired. It's actually a pretty funny quote unquote. We closed the acquisition of Draft Day in September of 2015, and we had a bunch of really big casinos ready to work with us. And then, do you remember what happened in October of 2015?
Oh man, give me the what was it?
Well, it was Ethan Haskell, right?
Oh yeah.
It was the moment, right? It was
the big event.
It was the big event where the New York Attorney General ultimately deemed daily fantasy sports illegal sports betting. And so obviously that happened, and that really changed our business. And then it forced us, because obviously at that point, all of the regular gaming operators stepped away from the table. So we had to pivot. Once again, if you're an entrepreneur, you got to learn how to pivot. You got to learn how to change, because sometimes there are powers that be that won't let you execute on the strategy that you're building. And so started looking at international partnerships and did a couple of those, but then started looking at other databases. And I was able to cross paths with a guy by the name of Bill Asher. Asher at the time owned Vivid, which is one of the biggest adult entertainment companies in the world. And Bill, internet marketing genius, serial entrepreneur, like brilliant genius guy. We started talking and collaborating because the idea of the adult databases or demographic and the daily fantasy sports demographics, they line up, right? So we started talking, and then, we started realizing that we shared a very strong kind of idea about the industry. And one thing led to another. And I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but there's my path, right? Anyway, we started talking, and in 2017, in July of 2017, almost 3 years ago now, I decided to leave Draft Day, and then Bill and I partnered up and started on the path of building Monkey Knife Fight. And, here we are now almost 3 years later. And, Monkey Knife Fight formally launched in September of 2018. And now we're number 3. Like it's been an exciting ride, man. And fantasy sports Fantasy sports is an incredible industry, and now because of what's going on with sports gambling and sports betting and how the legislation is rolling out and how the whole landscape is starting to change and shift, and brands and media companies are starting to get excited about it, it's a good time. It's a good time to be in our industry.
That's what I was going to say. It's so amazing to me being in this space for so long, the time frame and how things shift so quickly when you really look at it. Like that 2015 event that you mentioned seems like, to me, like decade ago. Like
totally,
it's just insane to me how that's not that far long ago that happened. And then where we are today, it's just things happen so quickly in this industry. And to your point, if you were going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to try to run a business or be in any part of business, you have to be ready for change. You have to be willing to accept change because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. And man, you've come a long way. That's a really cool story. I really love the path you had there, and a lot of those really kind of touched home with me as well. I was a Draft Day. I actually enjoyed Draft Day more than I loved FanDuel back in the day. Like it was just a cleaner interface. There was less people playing, right? It was just one of those like good experiences to play at Draft Day. A little easier to win and things like that. So that's fun. That's good stuff. So fast forward to today. So you're at Monkey Knife Fight. You guys started that up. You guys are clearly number 3 now. You're fighting up there to be up with DraftKings and FanDuel. But you guys go about it a little differently at Monkey Knife Fight, I think. Give us a little picture of how it is working, with Monkey Knife Fight and your user base. And just I feel like you guys are a little different than the other companies.
Well, and that was the whole point. I alluded to the meeting of the minds that of Bill Asher and myself, and Bill, who's had incredible success. He's a brand building genius. There were at the time when we started talking about this, there were a couple very important perspectives that we shared. One was that the classic salary cap version of daily fantasy sports, that product was kind of broken, right? We all know now that a vast majority of the money is won by a small percentage of the people.
Yeah, sure.
It's a very hardcore experience. If you don't have hours to spend and you don't have the knowledge, the knowledge of every single team and every single player and every single matchup, it's very hard to compete against, let's face it, the professional players, the sharks who are using math algorithms. And so we are both massive sports fans. But there was a real problem with that kind of traditional form of daily fantasy sports, and we both really wanted to try and figure out a way for that casual, passionate team fan to engage with fantasy sports without necessarily having to be pitted without having to spend hours and hours research or being effectively pitted against those sharks. So we shared a perspective about where we thought a product innovation could really benefit the sports fan, the casual sports fan. Like, we kind of wanted to bring the fan experience back into fantasy sports. It sounds a little cheesy, but that's really where it began. And then the other thing that we both agreed on was that there wasn't really a brand, like a relevant, culturally relevant brand in gaming, right? FanDuel and DraftKings have built incredible businesses.
Yep.
But you don't see a lot of people walking around with DraftKings t-shirts or FanDuel t-shirts, right? There's something about, or take sports gambling. I mean, there's some great brands out there, but they're not cool, sexy, or reverent, fun. And Bill's built some of the biggest brands that men love in the history of humanity. So that really appealed to me, to be able to work alongside someone who had that kind of expertise. So what we really wanted to do was to create a platform that was a lot easier to pick up, that was more catered to the, I'll give you an example. I mean, I did a little research. I know you're a hardcore St. Louis Cardinals fan. So ultimately, you would know that Harrison Bader is going to have a great game because he's on the road. He's facing a pitcher that he's had success with. Yep. So you as a St. Louis Cardinal fan knows your team. But if you're playing, an interleague game against the Blue Jays, you might not know about Kevin Biggio's success against right-handed batters or right-handed pitchers at home. If you're playing in a classic daily fantasy sports contest and you don't know all of those little variances, where to target, you're not going to win, because there are people who know that. Yeah. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to create an experience for you who loves Harrison Bader, who loves Paul DeYoung, who loves, the idea of Carlos Martinez tonight. And you're listening, you're reading about the matchup tonight, and you're playing the Milwaukee Brewers, and it's Brandon Woodruff on the mound, and you have Avi Garcia who's batting second tonight all of a sudden. So now you can play a contest on Monkey Knife Fight just focused on that one game, just focused on those star players that you really love, or even those secondary players on your favorite team that about. Yeah. You're not forced into targeting, as a football example, the third wide receiver on the LA Rams. Right. Like, honestly, right now, I don't even know who the third wide receiver on the LA Rams is or football game. But if you don't, walking into a classic DFS game, you're not going to win. Yeah. So what Bill and I really wanted to do was to create a platform that really was easy to understand from a local, passionate, casual team fan. And we launched in September of 2018, and we were thinking about just building awareness for a year, and then really kind of leaning on or pushing our foot on the gas in September of 2019 for the next football season. But December of 2018, January of 2019, the product started getting adopted, and things just kind of took off. And it's been a pretty exciting ride.
So give us a little bit about the name. I mean, the brand. I mean, I'm sure you've been asked this. I'm sure this question comes up a lot, but I'd love to hear it. Monkey Knife Fight. What's the relevance? Was it just hey man, we're sitting around over a beer? Oh, that's a funny name. Give me that story. What was that story on the name of the brand?
It wasn't beer. It was tequila.
Well, that's okay.
Let's make that clear.
Beer would have been a way worse name if you were just drinking beer. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, people ask that question all the time, like, why Monkey Knife Fight? I mean, the simple answer is exactly, right? I mean, Monkey
Why
Knife
not?
Fight is a name that you're not going to forget, right?
Yep.
I mean, it is a Simpsons reference. Bill and I are both Simpsons fans.
Yep.
The way that Bill, Bill told me a story, years ago about how Bill owns a slew of bars and restaurants. And the way that he likes to name those bars and restaurants is he would sit around with the manager or his partners at the bars and restaurants. They drink and they throw out these names. One night we did that, and a bunch of names were thrown around, and Monkey Knife Fight happened to be the one that kind of resonated the next day. But that being said, we were both a little intoxicated, and so the idea of Monkey Knife Fight when we woke up the next day was like, it's pretty funny. But we gave a bunch of names to our designer, who's incredibly talented, and he came back with a bunch of different logos, and saw the logo for Monkey Knife Fight right there, and. And it was like, wow, all right, we're Monkey Knife Fight, but it's something you can't forget, right? I mean, how many?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, right. I mean, how many fantasy companies have the name Draft or Fan in it, right?
Right. I mean, it's refreshing to see something that's not so descriptive, right? It's like it is a true brand, like you said earlier. So.
Well, that's part of our goal. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, and you guys have done a good job with that for sure. Now, I've been seeing news. I've been seeing you guys growing. I saw recently you guys had some kind of partnership or something with the Milwaukee Brewers, and you're starting to kind of get in with some of these teams. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, the growth that you expect when sports comes back and as things get moving here. What's some of the things we could see or expect to see out of Monkey Knife Fight?
Well, I mean, Monkey Knife Fight, we're poised to be extraordinarily aggressive, and we are being extraordinarily aggressive right now. As we talked about, this entire sector is starting to blow up.
Yep.
DraftKings and FanDuel have built incredible businesses. I mean, DraftKings went public a couple weeks ago at $4 billion, and now they're worth $8 billion, and they're predominantly a fantasy sports company, right? Sure. I mean, they're fixated on their future as a sports gambling operator, sports betting. But ultimately, this is this is a company that is now worth billions of dollars, and they're effectively a fantasy sports company. So Monkey Knife Fight, now being number 3 in the space, we have an unbelievable opportunity right now. And we are planning on being very aggressive. As you alluded to, we became the official daily fantasy sports partner of the Milwaukee Brewers last week. Yep. Officially, I mean, so exciting. Milwaukee is a great team, a great franchise, incredible fans, a great ballpark, a really good team, great people. And we're excited about the sports, the Wisconsin, especially, I mean, we're excited about, obviously, lots of sports fans, but that Wisconsin fan base is so passionate. Yep. And there's something about the Brewers that just kind of fit right with us. To be completely candid, Wisconsin is also a state that doesn't have sports gambling right on the horizon. Mm-hmm. And we are fixated and focused on becoming the best daily fantasy sports business and product and brand in North America. And we are going to, our plan is to continue to grow both our brand and our platform. We're speaking to lots of different teams, leagues, organizations about about many different things, because our perspective is the sports gaming, and I'll use sports gaming kind of as a all-encompassing term involving both sports gambling and daily fantasy sports. The sports gaming segment in North America or in the US, let's say, to focus it, I mean, it's exploding. It's going to explode. I mean, look at the investor reaction to DraftKings on the stock market. While everything else is going down, with the exception of Netflix and Amazon, well, here comes sports gambling, right? It's going back up, or it's going up. So there are very few other DFS companies, or there are no other DFS companies that are capitalized like we are, that has a team like we have, and that has a brand as compelling as our brand. Our product. I'll put our product up against any other site out there. Yep. Easy to pick up, cool to play, sexy to look at, fun, all of that, all those bells and whistles. But ultimately, we have positioned ourselves in a way where we're coming out swinging right now. Yep. We never took our foot off the gas. As soon as COVID happened, as soon as the pandemic and the shutdown happened, our owner committed to we're 37 full-time people. He committed to the entire team. No one was furloughed, 100% salary. It was, balls to the wall. Wow. Bill is, like I said, Bill is an incredible guy. And any great developers out there, any great marketing, sales, customer support, hey, we're hiring. So careers at monkeyknifefight.com. There's my plug, right? Come on, join the team. We have an awesome team. And, it's literally go, 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 go. And when sports come back, I mean, UFC coming back was great. NASCAR's this weekend. Golf is in a few weeks. Baseball, we're all pretty bullish. Baseball is coming back in early July.
Oh, yeah.
So we are, of course, we want live sports to come back, and that's going to, we kind of feel like a bull in a bullpen, right?
Yeah.
Let's get that thing open. Like we're bucking and we're ready to go. And so obviously we're excited for that moment, but right now we're talking to literally, so many teams and organizations and groups, from esports to pro sports to real brands to agencies. Like right now, we're really trying to plot and navigate how we're going to really harness the momentum of the sports gaming space, because we think that our opportunity is sky high because, like, as I mentioned, yes, we have a really cool gaming platform, but we also have a really compelling brand. And if you can marry those two things together, that's really sexy.
One thing I find interesting about all of that discussion there, and I don't know how much you can talk to this or whatnot, but I'll go ahead and go anyway. The brands like FanDuel and DraftKings are starting to put a lot of their attention to the sports betting side. And so I almost think, does that create an opportunity for Monkey Knife Fight in the daily fantasy space, where I know their teams are big and I know they got big teams, but maybe they're going to put a little less focus on that DFS side because they're really so gung-ho about the sports betting side. It's a two-part question. One, is Monkey Knife Fight looking to potentially get into the sports betting operator side of things, or are you truly sticking with DFS? Or if you can't answer that, I do understand that. And then secondly, could you see them slipping a little bit in that space, and maybe you guys being able to – that's why you're going to go so aggressive at that, maybe able to slip in there and then kind of take over a little bit?
So I'll answer the second question first, and then, yes, I'd be very happy to answer that first question. We're cards on the table.
Transparent.
Right? There's no bullshit with Monkey Knife Fight. Okay, so as far as FanDuel and DraftKings and their kind of their position in the daily fantasy sports space, listen, they're number 1 and 2 by a mile. I mean, let's face facts. Obviously, our goal is to get as close to them as humanly possible, because that's our ultimate goal, is to be number 1. FanDuel and DraftKings is focused on sports betting. I mean, that's no surprise to anyone. So ultimately, yes, I don't know anything direct about how much money they've allocated to their DFS business, but it is very clear from conversations I've had with, all the affiliates that you and I both know in the space, content providers, that their focus has definitely slipped a little bit from DFS. And also, let's face facts. They have spent 7-8 years spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in marketing their style of daily fantasy sports. If you're a sports fan and you have not played FanDuel or DraftKings yet, the chances of you converting now are fairly slim. And they know that, right? Why are you going to keep spending money hitting somebody over the head with something if they just don't want to do it, right? So they're brilliant. I mean, FanDuel and DraftKings are, the people that own FanDuel and the people that run Draft. I mean, they're brilliant. So let's face it. They understand what they're doing, and they know that the last thing they want to do is waste money. And the opportunity of sports gambling is massive. We all know how massive it's going to be. So our position is, no, we are leaning into daily fantasy sports. We are spending money. We are trying to build our position to grow our market share, because we know we have the opportunity. We're going to draft. I mean, Google didn't invent search, right?
So it was search before Google.
There you go. I mean, FanDuel and DraftKings have built an incredible industry, or have helped spearhead the growth. Many people have been involved, but let's say they spearheaded the growth of an incredible industry. We are very happy to draft their, no pun intended, to draft their, or maybe pun intended, to draft their great work and come on in and pick up a lot of those DFS users that either slipped off because they just lost all of their money playing as pros and sharks, and or convert those casual sports fans that checked out FanDuel and DraftKings and said, oh man, that looks way too complicated. I don't know who the third wide receiver on the LA Rams is. Oh, look at Monkey Knife Fight. I can pick more or less than Jared Goff, 276.5 yards, and Tom Brady, more or less,
Yeah.
286 and a half yards. And if I get both correct, I win. Oh, that sounds easy. That sounds
yeah.
fun. And, it's we have tons of different contest types.
Sure,
And
yeah.
that's just kind of our one of our main kind of more
Right,
or less
right,
contests. So, ultimately, we are ecstatic about where the gaming industry is right now, where FanDuel and DraftKings are really focused their attention. And then to tangent into your second question about Monkey Knife Fight eventually becoming a regulated sports gaming operator from a sports betting perspective, let's face it, we would be foolish not to have that on our roadmap,
Yep.
3-4 years, 5 years down the road.
Yep.
Our goal right now is to build the best daily fantasy sports business possible, to acquire as many customers, to build our brand, to create as compelling of a database as possible. And as sports gambling rolls out to more states, right now 9 states have legal mobile sports betting. That's 9. And FanDuel and DraftKings is not operating in all of them.
Right.
We're in 30, about to be 31 states right now. Hey, if I'm building a business, I'd rather be able to build my business in 31 states as opposed to just a few.
Sure.
And you and I both know how expensive it is
to
get into sports gambling.
Yeah.
So the reality is our plan is to build and focus on DFS. But let's face it, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when the time is right for us to pivot into becoming a regulated licensed sports betting operator.
Yep.
Yes. We love kind of props and proposition style daily fantasy sports. And we believe that by creating a brand synonymous with props, when we do make that pivot, Monkey Knife Fight becoming synonymous with props, that's a slam dunk. Because you and I both know that people typically utilize multiple sites for their gaming.
Sure.
You'll play FanDuel and DraftKings and Monkey Knife Fight.
Yep.
You'll go make a bet at FanDuel and you'll make a bet at DraftKings and you'll make a bet at wherever else, right? At BetMGM. So, hey, if we can become the leader or synonymous with one style, that's great. We love that idea. So, this is down the road, right?
Sure,
we're constantly thinking and evolving our strategy.
Right.
It's business, right? We got to be able to bob and weave, like any good entrepreneurial, endeavor. And so, I hope that answered your question. That, absolutely.
It did. Yeah. It did. That's awesome. That's amazing. Well, Nick, man, this is a great conversation. I could sit here and talk for hours. It's already been 30, 40 minutes. I don't want to keep you all day. What else, maybe some closing thoughts, anything else about the industry, just in general that you want the audience to hear about what you guys have going on, or just in general, anything else on your mind?
No, let's face it. The biggest thing on everyone's mind is sports coming back. Sports are coming back, and
craving it.
Well, that's it. And I think that as soon as sports comes back, you are going to see Monkey Knife Fight, and let's face it, a lot of other sports gaming operators and sites absolutely explode.
I agree.
I think that the regardless of the investment opportunities within this space, there are not a ton of opportunities out there, right? For investors who want to get into this industry, there aren't a lot of operators that you can buy into right now. There aren't a lot of, yes, you can go and you can buy stock on DraftKings, but you don't have that 10x, 20x opportunity. I will say to tease a little bit, we have huge plans.
Yeah.
We are planning on making a major play in this sector, and you can kind of read between the lines of kind of what I'm saying there. So, I think that, as far as, any parting shots, you started this off with people who are looking at getting into the fantasy sports industry.
Yep.
Hey, if you're sitting here listening to Ryan's show, obviously you're familiar with the sports space. If you're working in the fantasy sports or in the sports gaming industry right now, and you're looking for a change and you want to join an incredible team, careers at monkeyknifefight.com. We are building, we are growing fast. Honestly, we have just the best team. And you talked about how much fun you had at draft day and how much you loved their product.
Yeah.
When we started Monkey Knife Fight, Scott Malwig, who is a very, he's just an incredible daily fantasy sports, long time, kind of I don't know. I don't want to say operator. I don't want to say marketer. I don't want to say product guy. He's kind of an all-encompassing DFS
personality.
Yeah. I mean, Scott joined us at the beginning and runs our product. So there's a lot of kind of draft day stuff that we've kind of built on and made better and iterated. Like, we have an incredible team.
Yeah, sure.
And, we what's funny is, we've been remote for 3 years. We run completely remote. So it doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter, what your specific, focus is. Hey, like, we're making huge moves. And we're just excited to see what the fall is going to look like when you have, theoretically every single sport going. It's going to be, it's funny. We go from the kind of the desert of being a sports fan to literally the oasis of being a sports fan, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be nuts when sports comes back, because we're probably gonna have all these sports overlaying each other, trying to compete for time and this and that. And I think like you mentioned and you alluded to, the collective balloon that is growing here of people just ready for sports is just going to burst when it comes back. And there's going to be so many people playing fantasy sports, kind of getting their passion back, right? Because sometimes you can get, especially if you play a lot of DFS or play a lot of sports betting, you can get a little burnout with it as a player. And so I'm hopeful that this time off and this lag is going to almost rekindle some of these, some passion for the space, right? Somebody, oh man, I really missed it. I need to get back and play. I can't wait to play. And it just goes and explodes from there. So I think you're going to see that when sports comes back for sure.
I absolutely agree. I think people are chomping at the bit. And I think it's also going to be an opportunity for people who've never done DFS or have never played Monkey Knife Fight to say, that sounds kind of cool. Like, I'm going to give that a go because, I'm sitting there and watching baseball.
Yeah.
And I'm watching basketball at night. And it's like, what am I going to, I want to make this experience a little bit better. And everyone, you can play on your phone, you can sit on the couch, play with your friends. Like, I think that the idea of being a sports fan, especially in this space, it's also going to be a fanless experience. I think that, things like daily fantasy sports and things like Monkey Knife Fight is only going to make that fanless sports experience better and more exciting. I think so.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, we're pumped to see the pitches being thrown again and the home runs being hit again, man.
Well, I tell you what, you sold me. I'm about ready to fold up the business and head over to careers.monkeyknifefight.com and join the team. You sold me. I'm sure you guys have a great team, and I would second that. Anyone listening here that's looking to get into the industry, Nick and the team over here at Monkey Knife Fight, I mean, probably no better place to start. Or if you've been in for a while and you're looking for a change, something like that. I mean, these guys clearly know what they're doing and have a sexy way of doing it, a sexy brand, I would say, something a little out of the ordinary that, you wouldn't expect. So, man, Nick, I appreciate you being here. Where can the audience, I know you mentioned the URL, we'll put all that in the show notes after this, but if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, I know you're very transparent and open. Is there any certain place that they can look you up and learn more about you or contact you?
I mean, I think LinkedIn is great. I think LinkedIn is the best. And remember, like I was saying, and I truly believe, I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. I mean, anyone out there, hit me up, man. Hit me up on LinkedIn. You can find me. I mean, I'm not a massive Twitter guy. I mean, but I'm there, at Nic Sulsky at Twitter. Hit me anywhere, man. And,
awesome.
and like you said, at Monkey Knife Fight or at MKF, sorry. At Monkey Knife Fight _ on Instagram, play Monkey Knife Fight Facebook, like we're all over the place.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, best place to probably find me is LinkedIn, because then when you stalk me, I can at least stalk you back, so I can do a little research to know that you're also a St. Louis Cardinals fan. Right?
Yeah, hey, I am. I need the Cardinals back. I was gypped this spring because living now in Florida, I used to live in the Midwest and I'd get to go to tons of games. Now I live down in Florida. I don't get to see as many games, but I got spring training down here. So they're down in Jupiter. I go down for weeks at a time. I'll watch a ton of games when they travel around Florida. But man, they only played like a week of spring training and then cut it off. And so I didn't even get a chance to watch that. So I got gypped this year.
Yeah, but they'll get you back, because now as it looks like it's going to be DH in the National League. So you'll probably get to see Tyler O'Neill playing. That's kind of exciting.
That's all he can do is hit. Awesome. Well, Nick, I truly appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And
there you go, right?
yeah, I truly appreciate you being here. If you need anything from me, let me know. This is Nic Sulsky with Monkey Knife Fight. Thank you so much.
No problem, Ryan. My absolute pleasure, man.
All right, bye-bye. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time, have a great day.